Welcome to Jump Juice. Can I take your order?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I just left In-N-Out and I'm completely full on Flying Dutchman and animal fries, as well as a protein style double single. And I just wanted something sweet. Nothing on your menu is really impressing me. Do you happen to have any secret menu items I didn't know about?
I'm surprised you know about all the stuff at In-N-Out and you haven't heard about our white gummy. It's pretty good.
Oh, so what's in that?
We puree up some bi-weekly payments. We mix that along with a couple rapid rescores. And then we make sure we're getting your escrow closed quickly. And then that all gets nice, iced up, mixed in our blenders right here, given to you. Loyal customer.
Sounds good. I'll take 2. Christian Batchelor, welcome to Mortgage Monday. How are you today, my friend?
Good. Excited to be here.
This is going to be our second edition of the Mortgage Secret Menu. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I think this is V2, Mortgage Secrets. Our first one was our little In-N-Out drive-through. This one's going to be even better.
Yes. So many restaurants have secret menus. If you go to Jamba Juice and you can ask for I think there was a gummy bear drink or something.
The white gummy. I remember that one. That was good. 2,000 calories, I think it was.
That's why it's not on the menu. Yeah, it's not healthy.
But before we get into it, today's Mortgage Monday sponsor is Monetary Metals. Sponsors like these help us make shows every week so you guys can stay ahead in your investing game. At some point, you've probably considered buying gold or silver as an inflation hedge or to add some stability to your portfolio. But unlike rentals, metals don't make you any passive income. Until now. With Monetary Metals, you can own gold and silver while earning up to 5% per year on it, paid in ounces. First, open up an account with Monetary Metals. Next, choose which qualified business you want to lease the metals to. And third, earn passive income. If you're an accredited investor, you can even earn double-digit returns in their bond opportunities. Don't let inflation and high interest rates erode your hard-earned wealth. Diversify your holdings and earn inflation-proof income with Monetary Metals. A yield in gold, paid in gold. Head on over to monetary-metals.com/big, like BIG, for an exclusive offer just for BiggerPockets listeners. Now, back to Mortgage Mondays.
Well, we are going to be bringing you healthy options in today's show. These are things that you should ask your loan officer or your mortgage broker, depending on who you're using, about to save money on both your loan and the interest that you'll pay on the life of the loan. So let's jump right into the Mortgage Secret Menu number 1, bi-weekly payments. Christian, explain what these are.
Kind of the standard is, you get a mortgage, a month or two later, you have your first mortgage payment. You set it up on auto draft and you forget about it, and your mortgage payment comes out of your bank account on the first, maybe the third, the fifth. People have different payments, but basically you pay once a month, right? And every payment that you make re-amortizes your payment so that the next payment you have a little bit less that goes to interest and a little bit more that goes to principal. And over the course of your loan, the closer you get to paying it off, the bigger the percentage of that goes to principal is. Well, an alternative is you can make payments more frequently. It doesn't mean more money's coming out of your account. You just take your mortgage payment, cut it in half, and pay 2 payments per month. The benefit that gives is that it increases your amortization schedule a little bit, where you more quickly get towards paying principal rather than paying interest. And then if you spread out 12 months, and if you do it every 2 weeks, you actually end up making 26 payments during the year because there's not perfectly 2 weeks in every month, right? But it still lines up pretty well with your pay structure if you get paid every 2 weeks. It usually ends up with your mortgage getting paid off between 5 to 7 years early, which is a big win for a lot of buyers.
All right, Christian. So if I understand you correctly, the more that you pay towards your principal with every payment will increase the amount of the next payment that goes towards the principal. I realize this can sound semi-confusing, and it will have a very small impact on the actual payment you're making, but over the course of a 30-year time, this has a very significant impact because the goal of your loan is to get into the point where your $2,000 a month payment is heavier weighted towards principal than it is towards interest. Now, many lenders will let you go to a portal and set up a process where you're making half of your mortgage every 2 weeks. And the reason that this benefits you is you actually end up making an additional payment by the end of the year. That's because if you pay every single 2 weeks, that's 26 payments in the year, and not every month has the same number of days. Now, if every month had 28 days, paying at the end of the month would be the same as paying every 2 weeks. We tend to think of it like that, but months have more than 28 days. So most of the time, there's several days in the month where you didn't make a mortgage payment if you were paying for every 2 weeks. And so it ends up adding up to additional payments at the end of the year. Now, you could accomplish the same thing if your servicer doesn't allow you to pay biweekly. And what would you recommend there, Christian?
Yeah, in that case, when a servicer tells you that they don't allow this, right, a lot of people call it, and some people want to make weekly payments, right? If they maybe get a paycheck check every week. They just want to take care of their mortgage, or at least 1/4 of their monthly mortgage with every check. A lot of times lenders portals or servicers don't have a process in place to set up automated payments. You can mail in a check, you can send a wire, you can log in and pay it if your mortgage or whatever, payment service they accept. You can log in and make a payment, right? Anything that you pay over that required minimum payment per month goes towards your principal, right? So if you're paying every 2 weeks, eventually you get an extra payment in there, right? If you pay monthly, you get 24 payments. If you pay biweekly, you actually end up paying 26 by the end of the year. So there's 2 extra payments that happen, which equate to another full month. And over the course, like David said, that doesn't really change your balance initially up front, but we call that in the mortgage industry the compounding element, where over 15, 30 years, the time that you hold these mortgages, it does shave off. You can shave off 5 or 7 years off your mortgage, and your 30-year projection is now a 23-year projection, right? And that's a big win, right? That's a cash flowing property that's paid off 7 years early sometimes.
Especially when rates are higher. This was not as beneficial to you when you were getting 3% rates, 3.5% rates.
Absolutely.
But if you got a 7, 8, 9% rate, that extra principal contribution can have a significant impact. And I talk about that in an upcoming book I have about the 10 ways you make money in real estate. Paying down that loan is one of them. Now, moving on to the mortgage secret menu number 2 item, there are some options here to get a seller to pay for you as a buyer to get a lower rate. Christian, what are some options there?
Yeah, this is something we discuss a lot. I don't believe we've ever had an episode or a portion of a show where we've fully broken it down, though. And what this means, let's just use an example. Everybody does better with concrete numbers. If you're buying a $500,000 house, let's say, if that house appraises, and let's say it would support an appraisal of $510,000. So you're getting a little bit of a deal. Typically, when people are structuring a deal, when they're writing an offer, they're only really trying to negotiate the purchase price. But that doesn't always put them in the most competitive position. So in our experience, and I know, David, your real estate team does this all the time, if they feel confident that a $510,000 purchase price would be supported, it may be beneficial to write an offer for $510,000. However, we can turn around and have the seller credit us $10,000. Now, what does that actually look like at closing? You would now have to put down, let's say we're putting down 20%. You would have to put down 20% of $510,000 now instead of $500 instead. So that does increase the amount of money that you come to closing with. However, we're getting $10,000 the seller's giving you and wiping out all your closing costs. So that's your insurance policy, your property tax that are due, points if you pay to buy down, your interest rate, your title escrow fees. And it ends up being a better deal for you in the long term because you're spending much less money to close, even though you technically wrote a little bit higher of an offer. Right. And to the sellers, it looks the same because they're still $5,000 to $10,000 increase purchase price, but $10,000 decrease in cash that they close. So it's the same thing to them. It just puts you in a little bit better position to get a more competitive rate when you have more money to play with.
Yeah, and it can put you over the top when you're in a competitive offer situation as well. So you and I have bought houses together where there were other buyers. Everybody was going over asking price, but we went a little bit more over asking price than they did. Yet we asked for a really big credit in return, and the sellers just aren't smart enough to recognize that even though they got the higher price, they're going to net less because of the credit contributions. And it worked really good for us. So we got a house we wouldn't have got, and we got a better rate, and we saved more money, oddly enough, by paying a higher price than everybody else. Now, who do you think that the buyer or the borrower should go to first? Is this a question to run by their loan officer or the real estate agent?
Yeah, it's good to understand. Number one, limits. There are limits based on the loan program of how much money you can get, which is funny. We just had a situation the other day where somebody got I think it was a $150,000 purchase and they were trying to negotiate a $40,000 seller credit. That's too much. That's like 30% of your property value. You can't, right? They can't credit you a third of the house.
Well, explain that really quickly. How much can people get in credits?
Typically, the number to target is 3% from the seller. You add up your purchase price. If it's $500,000, 3% is $15,000. That's where we would like to set it. There's some wiggle room, so obviously discuss with your loan officer, but that's a good place to target with most loan products. And getting back to your first part of the question, who you should talk to first, understand the limits with your loan officer, understand the benefits that will give you. So maybe talk to them about the rate buy down, right? How much will this $15,000 buy me down on terms of my rate sheet? What would my savings monthly payment be on that? And then ultimately you need to talk to your realtor to make the negotiations. Right. So the realtor is the one making this happen. The loan officer is kind of like your prep work. The realtor is the one implementing it. Right.
So you got to go to loan officer first to say, hey, this is what I want to do. What are the limitations on me? Maybe someone doesn't know they can only get a 3% overall closing cost credit. Or a lot of people don't realize that they can't get a credit for more than what the closing costs are. So even if it's under 3%, if you have a total of $10,000 in closing costs, you can't get a $15,000 credit and pocket the extra $5,000 in cash. So talk to your loan officer to learn where the boundaries are, then bring this to your agent and say, here is what I would like to do. Go out there and get it done. All right, moving on here. A lot of people will compare rates because they think that all lenders are the same. They assume that they'll close on the same time, the service will be the same, and the only thing they're looking for is interest rates. Can you just explain the dynamics that some lenders are cheaper because they have employees that live in India or the Philippines? They're sort of virtually delegating this stuff out, and that means that it's way slower of a process, way more painful of a process, and that the cheap rate can cost you money in some cases.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, you used a car analogy, right? Going and buying a car. It's the same concept, right? You buy the cheapest car on the lot. Is it going to come with problems? Is it going to be the dependable everyday driver that you can depend on getting you to and from work? Or is it going to be something that's going to be a lemon, right? Going to be breaking down on you, not getting you from point A to point B. Now, I do want to say every lender is subject to some things that can happen, right? Borrowers could withhold something on their application. Something could come up. An appraisal can be delayed, right? Like no lender has a perfect batting rate.
Just like every car could have an issue that no one knew it had coming out of the factory.
Exactly. What you can do, though, is you can put yourself in the best position by working with a lender that you trust or has a track record of providing, good turn times, good rates, good quality advice and service. And at least you're getting into a Toyota that Toyotas can last for 20 years. Right? Like it's something dependable. It's something that has a reputation for being consistent and long lasting, right? And in the mortgage equivalent of that, that's good rates, good service, fast turn time, right? That's what we all want when we get any service in this industry.
So let's say that I'm comparing lenders and I go to Wells Fargo. That's really just one lender. That's the Wells Fargo lender. Then I go to a broker. That broker isn't really a lender with a interest rate. They are a wholesaler, or I'll let you use what word to describe this, but they have options for maybe 40 or 50 different lenders with varying rates and turn times. And the brokers are usually going to say, well, how quickly do you need to close? What does the deal look like? How clean is your file? And if it's a super clean file that they think they can get approved, maybe they put them with the lender that has the lower rate and it's a little riskier, but you're like, there's not much that could go wrong. Let's roll the dice versus, oh, this one's going to be a headache. You need to get a little bit higher rate to go with a lender that's got a really clean system. Explain what that process looks like and what borrowers should be considering when making the ultimate choice of which lender they're going to use if they're using a broker.
Yeah, 100%. And that's where the broker, we've used the example of Kayak, where, a lot of people think the broker world is like how Kayak is for travel, where you get, the American Airlines price and the United Airlines price, and they're all presented together, and then you get some hotel options. And really it's just a pricing engine, right? That's what Kayak is. It has an algorithm that goes out to all these vendors and it puts all the pricing together. A loan broker is not necessarily like that. We have access to pricing systems, but we also know these lenders, right? We develop relationships with the underwriters. We know who we can get, specific types of loans through with, right? Some of our lenders, we are able to influence what programs they offer. We're like Kayak that also, we made this example on a previous episode, but we're like Kayak that's going and getting on the plane and checking the seats for you to make sure they're comfortable first, right? Like that's a little bit different than just looking at price, right? And that's what you get when you work with a broker versus a direct lender.
All right, thank you for that. Last thing on the mortgage secret menu is the rapid rescore. What do people know about what a rapid rescore is and how it can help save them money on their loan?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to break into a little bit more detail. We did do a credit episode. Check out that episode on Mortgage Mondays in the same playlist if you're watching this. But specifically, we want to talk about how this can help when otherwise you wouldn't even know this exists. That's why this is the secret menu episode. We talked about credits being in brackets. To refresh you guys, credit scoring is based on every 20 points. So if you're 720 to 740, you get one pricing for loans. Typically, it caps out around 740. If you're 740 and up, you get the other pricing. If you're 700 to 720, you get a little bit worse pricing. What rescoring is fine-tuned adjustments on your credit score. So this is for the person that comes in at 719, right? They have a 719 FICO score, and there's a bracket where they can get into for 720. There may be a very fine little adjustment you could do. I mean, we're talking about like paying down your credit card by $100. Like that's simple. Like it could be something super simple that takes 24 hours to do, right? You just get us a new statement. We have this built into our system where if we see you that close to the next bracket, we already built it in. Hey, go pay $100 down on your credit. What? No, lender's never asked me to do that. Well, I promise you by you paying $100 on this bill that you have anyways, we're going to go save you $4,500 on your mortgage because we're going to bump you into the next pricing bracket. How does that sound? That's the value that most lenders would, you go to, not talking bad about anybody, but you go to a retail bank, you go to whoever who's not looking for these types of things. That's something that you can miss. That's the secret menu. How would you know that animal style fries existed in and out? It's not up on the menu. You heard it from somebody, right? Who has the knowledge, right? That's what this is. If the loan officer knows, $719, let's get them up. $4,500, only going to cost them $100. Heck yeah, that's worth it.
Right? What if you bring this up with your loan officer and they say, I don't know what a rapid rescore is, or we don't do that here?
Probably know what I'm going to say. Ask around, ask for a referral, check out who has the animal style fries because they're pretty good. Right?
There you go. One of my favorite things to do is to ask somebody, what would you do to improve this? So when I walk a property with a contractor, they can tell me, okay, they'll usually say, what do you want done? Then they'll give me a price to do it. Okay. What I want to turn around is say, all right, what would you do differently? How would you use that space better than I'm using it? How would you add another unit to this? What would you do to make it look better? And what I'm looking for is for them to say, well, I'd put an accent wall right here with stone. I'd say, okay, what would that cost? I got a guy that does that really cheap. Cost of materials is only this much money. Going to take him a half day of labor. I could do the whole thing for $900. I like that. Now I can make the decision of, is this worth $900? Not what is your budget? How much of your money can I spend as inefficiently as I choose to? Ask your agent, what would you change about the strategy? What would you change about my offer? Ask your loan officer, what would you do to make this better? How could you get me a better rate? Or how could you get my closing costs down? That lender may say, oh, well, I have this one agent that another one of my borrowers used and they did this and it worked great. That's really how I've learned most of the strategies that we talk about, is by asking that question to the professionals I'm using my core for. What would you do to make this better? So thanks, Christian, for joining me on this one. For people that want to reach out to you, what's the best way for them to do so?
Absolutely. Email Christian@theonebrokerage.com. Our website's theonebrokerage.com. We got a little apply now button in the top right corner if you're looking to get in touch.
There you go. You can find me at DavidGreen24 on Instagram or any other social media, as well as DavidGreen24.com to see what I got going on. Thanks again, Christian. I will see you next Monday on another episode of Mortgage Monday.